Hello and welcome to VistaTalks, interesting discussions with interesting people from all around the world. I'm your host for today, Simon Hodgkins, and today I'm happy to introduce you all to Scott Abel. Scott, also known as the Content Wrangler, is a leading figure in the field of content strategy. I know Scott has got extensive experience in technical communication management and has made a lot of contributions, significant contributions to the industry. As a CEO of the Content Wrangler, and a content strategy evangelist at Hereto, he combines practical expertise with a passion for effective content creation and management. So, Scott, how's that for an intro? Welcome to the show.
That's pretty good. Thanks for having me today, Simon. I appreciate it.
Very good. Let's get into it, Scott. We've got a lot to cover. I've mentioned there about content strategy, being a bit of an evangelist here. What got you inspired? How did you get into this? What made you become a content strategy evangelist?
So, to become a content strategy evangelist, I first had to become a content strategist. And so that I kind of wandered into by accident. I found myself as a contractor just out of university at a consulting firm that placed people for temporary jobs inside these big corporations that need knowledge workers for a short amount of time. And they had brought me and some other folks in on a team. And we didn't really have any idea what the team was designed to do. We knew we would create content, but we didn't know what for or why. And once I got to the pharmaceutical company, I realized that they have a plan. They are science-oriented companies. So they use mathematics and data and things like that. And they had embarked on a journey in 1999 called the transformation, not the digital transformation, just the transformation, as in we need to move from our, caterpillar stage to our butterfly stage and blossom as a pharmaceutical company. And their biggest challenge was a content challenge. The content challenge that pharmaceutical companies face is that in order to have a drug approved for sale and therefore to make profits from it, you must have the drug approved. And to do so, you must do all of the studying on humans to determine the efficacy and safety of the drug. But you also have to submit to regulators in various governments, including the United States Food and Drug Administration, an application called the New Drug Application. It is a hefty document, upwards of 80,000 pages in the ones that I worked on, and are submitted to the regulatory agency for review. The reason that this is important is because those products are patented. So they only have a protected lifetime of a certain number of years. And I want to say it's something around 18 years in the United States, maybe. That may or may not be correct, but it's a couple of decades worth of protection-ish. And the challenge was when the patent expires, all their competitors can make their drugs for free without making any of the investment, right, in the research and development, which is significant. And so they wanted to figure out how could we expedite the review process of the new drug application, because for every day that patent expires, right, one more day goes by, they lose the opportunity to sell that drug. And the drug I was working on, there was a $4 million a day opportunity. So for every day the drug was not on the market, they hypothetically did not earn the $4 million they thought they would. So they had a goal to trim down the amount of time that it took to submit that new drug application so it could get approved faster. And in the end, they would make more profit off of the investment they had made in the research and development. So when I was there, I realized this is strategic thinking. I make content and it's strategic. I think that means I'm a content strategist. There was no book on content strategy. There was no anything on the web about content strategy. I just thought it made sense. It's a dictionary term. And then over time, I realized, oh, this is lacking everywhere. I should be evangelizing for this and try to find other science-minded, evidence-informed companies to do work for. So that's the long-winded version of that story.
Well, that's brilliant. And you've been wrangling content ever since, Scott. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of today's landscape then. So thank you very much for giving us that context, particularly when it comes to things like life sciences, healthcare, medtech, etc. Highly regulated for sure. But when we talk about today's landscape, we're in the throes of the AI hype cycle. Content is, I mean, it was exploding before AI sort of became mainstream, and now it just seems to be getting bigger, faster. Every day there's new content being produced. We've got machines making content now. How do you see your role changing? Because the role of content is evolving. I'm assuming your outlook and the way you're looking at things maybe has evolved a little bit too. In this age of AI and in this age of automation.
I mean, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, right, around the entire issue of automating things using artificial intelligence and other technologies related to that. But I believe there's a pro and con to each one, and I'm not saying that I am capable of predicting the future because I don't believe that I am. But I would say that it seems like we're going to go through a couple of rough patches of trying to determine how to use this technology. We're going to make mistakes like we do with everything, when we start off, and then we'll get better with it. I'm hopeful that there's no big disasters, but the reality is this technology, in my mind, is so powerful in comparison to other technological advances that we may be entering a period that we need to re-engineer how we think about everything that relies on, touch points between two things. Make one thing do another thing. Okay, can we make the machine do those things? I think that's a different way of thinking. It's a systems thinking approach, and while I gravitate to that, I don't feel like that's where my brain is. You know what I mean? Like I think it's interesting from an intellectual vantage point, but I don't think that everybody else is where I am or where you are in thinking about content. So we've got struggles in our own with our peers and our the people that we want in our industry to participate in the best way possible to make content. They're also unsure, wanting some guarantees that things won't go awry. I think these are all fear-based things, but that means that my job will also become trying to champion over the fear, right? How do I help people be willing to take a risk that could end up being a bad thing, but that there's probably some utility in the end. So I feel like, the job is just changing. I don't even know if this will be my job. Like, I think this revolution is so dramatic that I could find myself doing something related or maybe even tangential to what I do today. And I would imagine that's true for a lot of people because the knowledge that we might have an aha moment about how to use these new technologies in a creative way that a machine won't have, right? Humans have to come up with these notions of how to put all this stuff to work. And I feel like that's where we're going to land. We're going to be the creative juice behind how we might deploy these technologies in good and bad ways.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think the next book title just emerged there, Championing Over the Fear. I think that could be another one for you.
Actually, really good
Um,
night. Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's an interesting point. And you also mentioned, the word struggling there. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about organizational struggle because a lot of organizations are struggling with this technology. We're also struggling with knowledge silos, but in particular, we still have a lot of content silos going on, don't we? And maybe some companies, we've seen some big brands, some big media brands that have a lot of content starting to do deals with AI companies, starting to realize that they have this sort of data lake of information. What advice do you give? What you thinking around some of this struggle when we come to these content silos?
Well, I've always been in the past, I was a silo busting kind of guy. Like I wanted you to knock them down and to unify everything. And I think that there's still some utility to that, but it's really a struggle. For example, I remember speaking with Anne Rockley, who I worked with on the pharmaceutical project I started the story with at the beginning of the show. And she was trying to figure out how can we explain to these companies how we can bring everything together in one place and call it enterprise when nobody really does it at an enterprise level. So her comment to me was, if I had it to do all over again, I would retitle my book. This is Anne Rockley's book. It was called Managing Enterprise Content, a Unified Content Strategy. So she still believes there's a need for a unified content strategy. She just believes it's unlikely that the entire enterprise will unify. And so then what does that mean for us? That means that we're going to have silos and we need to somehow bridge them together or devise methods for them to be able to work together, even if they need to be separate for some reason. But I think the sticky part of all this is that while it seems logical for departments to work differently for all the many reasons that they can come up with for why they're different, there is also an argument for some unified standardization. And if you could just get all the different content teams to standardize on a couple of different things, then they could interoperate. Those pieces of content could be swapped back and forth between those teams that are different, that may use different tools, that may have slightly different approaches, but they would agree on some kinds of standardization. One great example would be terminology, right? If you can get everybody to agree not to use certain words and to prefer some other words that would be more, maybe less ambiguous, more specific, you can help in all kinds of ways, right? You help machine translation. You help the generative AI systems understand what you're talking about. If you semantically enhance that content with, semantics and give more intelligence to the content, you can make the enterprise smarter. And so I feel like the silos are not going to go away, but they will reveal the need for standardization. And I think it's already starting with a lot of data scientists starting to talk about the role of structured content and structured data, and how companies that have invested in that are actually kind of ahead of the game because their content has more cues in it for the machines that we're using to process it to act upon. So I feel like the silos aren't going to go away. I want them to, but I think it's human nature.
Yeah, so from silo busting to these sort of key components, isn't it, of a successful content strategy? You were talking about, getting the data in the right order, getting it right. And I think people are sitting on lots of data silos, but not necessarily in the shape where it can be utilized effectively. Is that one of these sort of cornerstones of these key components, Scott?
Yeah, and I think the magic that is perceived to be accompanied with AI um, tends to make people think we do not need to do any of these things, like enhancing the value of our content by making it semantically rich and therefore more machine processable. I think that those are fallacies, right? Those are not true. We do need to invest in that. The folks who are trying to skip over it are wishful thinking that this will be magical. And I think these are also some of the same people who want that. They don't want to change, but they want the benefit of change, right? So we don't want to invest in doing the work to structure and semantically enrich our content. What we prefer is that we just point it at XYZ GPT, right? And it does it magically for us. But the reality is they also don't want the hallucinations that come along with not having structured, semantically controlled information as the source. And so they will push away from the AI at the same time that they're gravitating toward it, which creates kind of a conundrum inside organizations. And I think that's the job of the content strategist, maybe to start talking about what does that look like to think about the decisions we make about how we're going to create, manage, and deliver content so that it's not just solving a problem today, but it's not creating new problems downstream that don't rear their ugly head until later, and then they surprise us and that catches us off guard. And I think that's what I meant earlier by we're going to make some mistakes and then we'll have to go back and fix them.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Scott. And I think that semantic enrichment, as you were talking there, AI is kind of the magic, but we still need the magician at this stage. So that's kind of the way I was thinking there as you were talking about that. And I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned there about, the people that are dealing with maybe some of these struggles or some of these opportunities, depending on how we want to sort of term it. But as a content professional operating today and maybe looking as far as we can into the future, any advice for people that are trying to stay adaptable, trying to stay agile, trying to stay ahead of what's happening in this, really fast, rapidly changing landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the typical advice that you would hear from anybody that's a consultant or somebody who tries to master one portion of an industry and share with others. And that's that you have to continuously want to be able to learn more. And if you're not intellectually curious about these things, then that will be really challenging to come up with new approaches and ideas that incorporate them because you haven't gave your brain the opportunity to have that aha moment, right? And I understand why people are skittish about diving deep into new technology because they may fail. Maybe it won't result in some kind of improvement, but it's always a learning adventure. And I think that's the first and best advice. And the second piece is, I think, networking. You cannot really underestimate the value of networking. I say this not necessarily thinking about examples that were my personal examples, but they did involve me. For example, because I do so many speeches and I have so many guests on the shows that I host on my webinar network, I get to hear all kinds of case studies and use cases from people who are creative, who are trying to be innovative and disruptive. And that makes my brain, super happy. So I think when I meet those people, now I have a network that I can reach out to. And so sometimes the people will say, hey, I'm part of your network and I need help with this. Or, hey, I want to learn some new stuff. Do you know somebody? And I may have just talked to somebody who said, if I only had 3 people who wanted to learn this, I would teach them and I could connect them up. And so I think your network is super important. It is not going to provide you probably with the instant gratification you would like. Like, you don't just sign up to LinkedIn and all of a sudden have great people who will be referring, to business to you or helping you get a new job. But it could certainly help you learn new things, and they could introduce you to new people and connect you in new ways. And I think the last thing is being willing to embrace the new technology and take a risk on your own. So, for example, at a recent conference, I gave a presentation on how I used artificial intelligence and a new type of system called a prompt management system. So, like a content management system for prompts, which I believe will all be filtered into one tool one day. It won't be separate systems, but for today it is. And I wanted to take a challenge, a practical challenge, and show people that one person, can trim the amount of labor that it takes to do something very labor intensive, which is to write all of the descriptions for my 130 plus shows a year that I do. And they're standardized, but they're not always the same. There's always a different day, always a different time, always a different guest, always a different title. You see what I mean? But there's a lot of similarities. It always takes place on the web. You always use this software browser. You always use certain things are the same. So I can use that example and I can then go out and say, I'm not going to show you how to do it in your company. I'm going to show you that even I can make this work. And then I show them the math. It used to cost me several $1,000s. Now it costs me $800. Oh, multiply that times 130, right? See how much time I save. I feel like if we can start doing those little projects on our own to teach ourselves how to use these technologies, we won't solve the business problems that are much bigger and require scale and investment and things like that. But we can start to get other people who are our peers and our coworkers to come along with us on the journey. One of the biggest challenges for content strategists over the years has been trying to get people to adopt content strategy. This seems ridiculous, and it is. It's because when people hear content strategy, what they hear is, I make content, and of course I do it strategically. I mean, I'm not an idiot, right? And so they just think they're already doing content strategy. And then when you tell them, okay, you ask them, what is your strategy? They tell you their plan, their step-by-step tactics. And looks like these are the things you're going to do. That's not your strategy. Those are the individual things. And so I think all of these changes are happening around us right now, and it invites miscommunication, people to assume that they know what generative AI is capable of doing or not capable of doing based on one little experiment that wasn't really something they did for themselves. I think if you do it yourself, you learn what didn't work and you go, oh, I won't do that again. And then you tell other people, don't do that. I did it before. There's a better way to do it. And if we can do those things, continuous education, network, and then get out there and test these, technologies and approaches out, I think that's the best way for us to move forward and kind of take advantage of these new technologies.
Yeah, that's very insightful, Scott, because, for everybody who is working with AI or generative AI and LLMs and prompt engineering and writing prompts, I think we've all found ourselves having to remind the AI not to do this a certain way, to do it another way. Don't use these words, do it, do use these words. And as you say, it takes a little bit of care and attention. And maybe we get to a point where, half the audience think you should just talk to it like it's a human. The other half are deeply engaged in prompt engineering. And the answer is probably somewhere in between. I like what you said about this will probably all be consolidated at some point as it gets smarter, right?
It's got to be. I mean, I ask CEOs of AI companies that approach me and want to help me to help them, gather some attention for their brand. And I ask them this question always just to figure out where they fit. I say, do you exist to be a software company to sell software licenses to individuals or companies over a long span of time? Or do you exist to create a software company that you want to sell to another company so that you can move on to a different project? Those are two different business approaches, right? And models. And you can tell a lot when the CEO is very transparent and says, "Uh, I'm in business to sell the software, but for the right amount of money, I would sell this company." That means they would sell the company, right? So all of their decision making is not always made to improve customer experience, for example. It may be to increase the value of the company and the attractiveness of it to be purchased by another company. And so the decisions that they make are sometimes not what we would, it doesn't seem obvious to you until you know that their modus operandi, right? What's behind their thinking. And then the flip side is a lot of the vendors of the products that are made today are aiming at some kind of shiny thing that they hope to achieve in the future. And it's very squishy. They can't really define where they're trying to go. What does success look like in this new environment? But what we do know is that consumer behavior changed during the pandemic. And that today, if you are not building self-service content, you are missing a humongous opportunity because you can deploy the machine learning and the AI to help you with it, but you can also better understand your customers, provide better experiences, and leverage the content that's often problematic to do so.
100%. I want to go back a little bit because you mentioned something that I must ask you about. And you kind of mentioned your own webinar series. And that's one of the things I want to ask you about, because not only have you written and published books, which I'm sure you can touch on for me here too, but you have this webinar series, don't you? The Content Wrangler, and you've got some. I mean, I've attended a number of them. They're very insightful discussions. Could you maybe bring that to light? Give us a bit of insight for people watching or listening to us here today, and maybe some of our audience might be interested in what you're doing there, because some of the topics are really in depth.
Yeah, thank you. So I started the Content Wrangler webinar channel on a software package called Bright Talk. Think of it as a marketplace for webinars, but it's a controlled community. You log in, you share some information about yourself, and then the software monitors what you watch. So if you watch shows on localization and translation a lot, then other webinar hosts or presenters will offer shows on similar topics. The software algorithm runs through your data and says, hey, if you liked this show, just like Amazon, if you like this product, you might like that product. And so I've created a community of people who watch webinars about information management and content. And the Content Wrangler webinar series has got about 731 hour recorded shows so far. We've got about another 60 or 70 coming up for the rest of the year that have not been recorded yet. And then there's about 70,000, 73,000 or so people who opt in and subscribe to that channel. That does not mean they watch webinars every day, but they're able to access those shows on demand whenever they want. Those shows are all free. We don't charge the attendee for any of the shows. They're sponsored shows, usually by a software company or a conference or something like that. Sometimes they're not sponsored shows. For example, I have interest in dance music remixing because as a child, I was a DJ. That's another story for a different day, but I am still intimately involved in making music, dance music. And that music is making is very similar. It's a bunch of little components, just like content, and you assemble it to make a deliverable called a song. And I invited a DJ to be on the show, and he invited a videographer who makes his videos. So he mixes music and mashes up a bunch of different songs into a very short 3-minute song. And then they do the same thing with video snippets. And to make them into a product that seems seamless at the end is a very, very labor intensive brain power kind of job. It's very similar to what we do with content, with information that we type or pictures and images and charts, but it has some differences. And so on this show, the Content Wrangler webinar series, you could see anything related to content. For example, we've had interview shows. We have a show called Coffee and Content, which is about content for content professionals. We had the founder of the Internet Archive on the show to explain why we need to archive all this information, what approach do they use to do so, what can people as consumers obtain from that website that's been archived. It's been busy capturing the internet and all the knowledge it can. We had an emoji designer on a show. It was our highest attended show ever. It is the opposite of the intelligent content, advanced information management topics I technically, talk about. but I was encouraged to try something different and to have a broader interest topic to see what would happen. What happened was 10 times more people than the regular webinar signed up to watch a show about emojis. Who knew, right? We also have interviews and case studies with practitioners, so people who are working as technical writers, information architects, translators, terminologists, to ask them about their jobs and to kind of learn about what they do in a transparent and kind of engaging way that's a little less stodgy than a typical presentation. And then the third type of shows that we have are slide deck driven presentations, which are topic based. And they're just topics that are of interest to technical communicators, information developers, and other information professionals. They're all free. You can check them out at brighttalk.com. You can search for The Content Wrangler using the search feature, and it'll show you the channel. You can subscribe. I think you have to give your name and an email address or something simple, and then you're in.
Well, that sounds wonderful, and a wealth of content there. And as somebody who has attended and learned and been experiencing those shows that you're talking about, certainly worthwhile people heading over to Bright Talk and checking out the Content Wrangler webinar series. 100%.
Thank you.
Before we run out of time, Scott, is there anything else that you're working on, or anything else maybe that we haven't touched on today that you know with our audience today?
Yeah, I touched on it for just a second when I said that I thought that self-service content experiences were the rich area for improvement right now. Certainly AI can help with that, but there's also this need to recognize that humans feel empowered when they learn how to use a computer to obtain an answer. And sometimes humans can be, we're all humans, so we could share these feelings. Sometimes humans can be lazy and say, I don't want to figure out this problem myself. I want to ask somebody. And so companies have to support call centers, right, where people can call in and get questions, but it's very expensive. And they always want to reduce the cost of support. They want to trim that cost down. They're working on ways to do that using artificial intelligence, but the best way is to avoid anyone having to call. So there's a kind of an important thing to think about over the next year or so, I think, and that is, how are we best going to serve customers who want to help themselves? Not all customers want to, by the way. There is a sliver in every research survey done of people who prefer to call customer support. In fact, my father was one of them. He used to say things like this: if I bought the product at a discount store and it cost $8, I'm not calling support and I'm not bothering to return it. I'm throwing it in the trash. If I bought an $80,000 car, you owe me to answer the phone. I'm calling you and I expect you to answer the phone, and you should give me the answer to my question. I'm your customer. And if you would like me to come back and spend $80,000 on an automobile again, you should provide me that kind of support. But when you scale self-service support, it allows you to do all kinds of other content scaling, because what you learn and what you do to provide support allows you to provide any kind of information, even if it's not support information. So kind of doubling down on providing the best online experience for people to access your information wherever they are on whatever device they want to, within reason, I think is the holy grail. And if we can start to think about that and stop worrying so much about how AI will do it all, instead map out what needs to be done, decide how technology can help us do that, and then work toward making a scalable, repeatable, kind of a growth-centered self-service experience. And if you start with your technical support and documentation content, it's rich with the answers to the questions that people have already. So you've got a really good chance of helping at least some of your audience feel great about not having to call support.
Really like that doubling down approach, Scott. Thanks for sharing that insight. And that brings us lovely to the end of today's show with Scott Abel. Please make sure to tune in again to see and or listen to another episode of VistaTalks. We'll discuss more interesting topics with interesting people from all around the world, just like Scott. But thanks for being on the show, Scott. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you again today.
Thanks for having me. It was super fun, and I hope your audience enjoyed it.